Welcome to the Dirt Do Conversations. My name's Andy Clark and I'm here today with Ash Keegan. Ash is the CEO of Food and Beverage Australia Limited, otherwise known as FABAL, which is one of Australia's largest privately owned viticulture and agricultural management company. Welcome this morning, Ash.
Morning, Andy.
I hope you've got your coffee ready to go this morning. Keep you alert and with it. But thanks for joining me. Now, before you were the CEO with FABAL, you were the Chief Viticulturist within the company as well as spending some time developing vineyards in Margaret River. I guess your entry into the viticulture and vineyard landscape is a little bit unconventional, so to speak. Are you able just to, I guess, explain where you've come from and how you've managed to be where you are?
Yeah, unconventional or almost accidental, probably better description, Andy. Yeah, my background, originally trained as a doctor of chiropractic. I was in private practice and decided as a sort of young teenager that that's what I was going to do. I moved what was supposed to be for 6 months into outback Western Australia to help a friend out in a clinic, and as you do, met my wife there and decided that we were going to move down to Margaret River where her family had just bought a vineyard down there, and fortunately her dad was crook and needed a hand to look after his vineyard, and I sort of pointed out the back window and said, I assume the vines are those things in the long straight rows out there, and sure, happy to help. And I was expected to be a few weeks worth of something a little bit different turned into 23 years later. I'm sitting here with a complete career change and love every minute of it, and wouldn't change a thing, I don't think.
That's obviously a very different, a massive change to go from chiropractor into agriculture. I guess who are some of the people that have helped you along the way, or I guess have proved inspiration or as mentors, so to speak?
Well, look, I think I get asked a bit actually. It might sound funny, but it's not a significant differential between the two professions. When I first sort of entered into the industry, I started consuming as much knowledge as I possibly could, grab all the textbooks and just read as hard as I possibly could. And one of the things that sort of, I guess, when I reflect back, attracted me to the industry is, the ability to still diagnose different situations, still look at a whole suite of symptoms going on in a paddock, similar to what I would do in a clinical situation, and then impart change and effect and try to effectively improve or remedy a situation. I was really lucky in the first instance, and I think one of the things that still strikes me about our industry is when people understood what was going on with my father-in-law, people just started showing up and understanding that I had zero knowledge and just basically helping me out. And so I guess, I had a background where I could reasonably effectively pick up the knowledge, but having the opportunity to sort of get exposed to really great people to help me along the way. And that hasn't really changed. And I think, I think I read maybe 5 years worth of Great Grown Winemaker over a couple of weeks. And I was looking at having to try to make some decisions about watering grapevines, and Mike McCarthy won't remember it, but I just picked up the phone and rang Mike McCarthy from WA to South Australia and said, can you tell me how to irrigate a grapevine? And, on the other end of the phone going, pretty unusual question, but yeah, that's how I stepped through that. And so, I guess that opportunity to sort of ask questions of pretty smart people were really good. I fundamentally ended up taking a role building a big vineyard in Margaret River, and one of the principal reasons I took that was Andrew Pike was the consultant for the company at the time, and I literally took the job just because I could get access to Pikey, and he had a significant influence in the way I go about doing things. You know, most people would know him from Pike's Wines, and he and Neil, but prior to that, he had 20 years running Southcorp as a general manager, which is, you know, the predecessor of the Treasury. And I remember, you know, the first time I set up for a visit with him in the paddock, where he flew across to WA to do a consultancy visit for me, and I had a heap of information that I'd collected about a couple of problems that I had in the vineyard. And he taught me in that visit probably one of the most high impact things that I've learned during the career. And we wandered out into the paddock, and I had my folder full of test results and all the things that I'd thought about, and sort of said, "Pikey, what's going on here?" And he looked at it, looked at my test results. He said, "Look, no, I haven't seen it before." And we went to the next site, and same thing happened. He goes, "Don't know, Ash, don't know what's going on there." Very early on, really important, to the fact that it was okay for Andrew Pike, with 20 years of experience running one of the largest businesses in the country, it was okay for him to say, "I don't know." Then it was probably okay for Keegan to say, "I don't know." And that mindset where I don't have to know everything. You know, it's okay to sort of bump up against the unknown and then hunt hard to try to investigate that. It's something that I've done a lot of, and it's something that I encourage with my team at a day-to-day level as well.
That's a great insight and learning to have early on in your career, I think. And it's funny how just the smallest conversations that might seem insignificant to the person who's actually giving you that advice at the time, but that can really, really stick with you. And likewise, I know I've shared this with you recently, but I think it was back in 2011, I actually saw you present at a workshop in Victoria, and you might have been Wangaratta or somewhere like that. And it was something quite similar in the sense that it was a piece of knowledge that really resonated with me and stuck with me that you shared, and that was around your paddock PhD, which I guess is I guess it's fundamental to the lesson that Andrew Pike shared with you, and the fact that you don't necessarily know all the answers to everything. Are you able to elaborate a little bit on your paddock PhD?
Yeah, so I guess mentally, I think it was Einstein that says as the volume of his knowledge increases, so does the surface area of the unknown. And so it's normal that we bump up against things we don't know. And every single day in the paddock, we do that. And so what I've worked with my guys about is, you know, when I term the paddock PhDs, we should be trialing stuff. We should be pushing the envelope every single day in the paddock, to the point where one of the key differences between, you know, what I used to do in the human health spectrum versus now what I do in the vineyard is that I've got millions of patients, for want of a better term, out in the paddock. And if I want to do research, I don't have to go through any ethical committees. I don't have to, you know, do any of that work. I can herd a Chardonnay grapevine, or I can test that or stress that or do all of the things that I need to do to find out the cause and reaction. And it's an amazing tool to have if you think about that from a perspective of, you know, we often hear about winemakers doing multiple vintages in their career. Well, I think as viticulturists, we can do hundreds of vintages almost within a vintage. You know, we can dry Chardonnay, we can look at hard prune Chardonnay, we can wet it up, you know, so we can do a growing environment, we can put in controls, put in an experiment, and then just let it run and see what happens. So the way we do that in our business is that paddock PhD is put in a control, put in multiple different treatments. Maybe you might want to look at how that watering rate's going to change the behaviour of the plant. We'll put in 50% of normal, put in 75%, put 100%, 150%, 200%, put in 400% water, and let that run. And then you can do that by simply just putting drippers into a few panels. It doesn't have to be on a paddock level. And then we stand back, and the reason why I call it a paddock PhD is we don't write it up. If you can't walk past and show your peers, and we can't see a difference, then it's not worth, there's probably no difference. If we, as trained viticulturists, can look at it and see a difference, then we start to dive in and have a look at it. So no thesis, no writing up. Might be a bit of reading, but you don't need to write it up. Pretty nice.
And so when you've gone through this process, and obviously, like you say, you've got hundreds of different vintages going on in each year, potentially. What are some of the key learnings that you've had through going, in exploring and pushing your boundaries and seeing what is and isn't possible?
Look, I think as viticulturists, we've got a limited tool belt. We've got pruning and operational sort of inputs. We've got irrigation. We've got fertilizer. Every viticulturist starting your career, you need to find the edge of the envelope on each one of those activities. So if you haven't zero bud pruned a vine, then you need to. If you haven't minimally pruned a vine and see what happens next to the normal conditions, if you haven't cane pruned the vine, then you have to do that. Just go and hide it in the middle of the paddock. No one will know, and learn and see what it does. Similarly, if you haven't dropped leaves off a vine, you haven't turned them yellow and collapsed that crop because of lack of water, then you're not trying hard enough. You need to do that to, one, help you sleep at night, because most of us lay awake worrying about what we're doing with the paddock. And I like to have these early warning systems in place, and I try to get all my guys to do that. So you've got a section, even it's just a few panels that are running at 75% of your water inputs. They become the in your coal mine, so that you can sort of go, okay, now I'm getting close to the edge because my experimental controls are starting to shed leaves. Then it's time to think about it. Yeah, you really need to be finding that edge of the envelope in everything that we do, and challenge the dogma of what we did another one where we were looking at gypsum block application or gypsum applications and whether there was enough rainfall to dissolve the gypsum. Well, we were putting 2 tonne to the hectare out. Could we put 4 tonne to the hectare out and get a result? Well, let's put, none, 2, 4, 10, 20 tonne to the hectare and see what happens, and see where whether we can see an impact, both negative and positive as well.
I think it's something that no matter what aspect in life, it's life's far more interesting at the fringes. And so if you can understand where the boundaries are, where you have those early indicators, it helps you actually understand the system that you're working in, because every system is going to be different as well. So what practices you've learnt in one region might be completely different to how you can actually operate in another. So you've got to have that continual learning mindset to keep exploring those boundaries, really.
I think that's really important, Andy. That's a really good point, because, whilst I cut my teeth in Western Australia viticulture, moving into some of the warm irrigated areas and things, you're relearning, so the bulk underlying rules might be the same, but you need to calibrate every time you go into a different paddock, a different soil type. And by putting those controls in place and pushing the envelope on small sections, then you calibrate so much quicker as well. And it increases your learning capacity and your ability to sort of find your sweet spots a lot more quickly.
Ash, the last probably decade or so of operating within the Australian wine industry has been challenging on an economic sense, to say the least. How do you as an organisation go about negotiating those sorts of conditions, and how do you sort of build resilience into your business in that regard?
Sorry, Andy, you broke up the first part of that question.
Sorry, I was just saying that the last decade has been pretty challenging in an economic sense within the industry. As a business, how do you go about, I guess, managing that and building resilience within your business to be able to handle those sorts of times?
One step at a I think it's certainly been very difficult. I have a user model in our business where I empower each of the managers. So having that responsibility and the authority out in the paddocks, I find that I have guys that are thinking, eating, sleeping with the context of the best outcomes for the vineyard. There's multiple things you have to do in running a business to get through difficult times and different challenges. But I think the other thing that I would say is, even though it's a challenging commercial environment, you can't forget the overall philosophy of what you're doing. You can't throw out your values just to make a bottom line right. And we have a very simple mandate, because I run properties all over the country. I can't be there regularly. I have to delegate that responsibility to guys, and we have all the systems and policies and procedures in place, but they're faced with something that they haven't come up with before, and they can't get hold of anybody to help them. Then they have to make that decision based on these three parameters in this order. It's for anybody else in harm's way, remembering that the product that we make is a food grade product. So never ever compromise that. Put it on the ground before you compromise that. And the second part of the product is that we leave an environmental footprint. So make good decisions about what we do in that context, be responsible for what we do in that context. And hopefully if you get the first two things right, then you'll get a bit of the third one over the longer run. Don't get me wrong, we scrutinise every cent that we spend, but I think I remember years ago reading a Harvard Business Review on what great businesses do, and there's three rules that they referred to as, I think, better before cheaper. So be better before you be cheaper, and revenue before costs. And rule three is that there's no other rules. So really in business, we really need to try to sort of make sure that we're operating in a competitive environment. I've got lots of great growers that can supply great grapes to our customers, but I want to be better, and I want to base our business on revenue before costs. So I mean, my guys sitting watching this will laugh and start throwing things at the screen, saying I do watch costs as well. But I think focus on differentiating our business. I'm absolutely anal about getting chemistry right. Being safe, making good decisions about that, withholding periods, re-entry periods, all of those things that I think our customers, and many of them have said to me over the journey that they trust our fruit, because they know if there's a problem, if one of our guys makes a mistake, we're the first to put a hand up, lock it out, test it, we'll chuck it on the ground before we put any compromised fruit into the market, both for our business, for their businesses, and for the industry as a whole. So that's probably one example of better before cheaper.
Mm-hmm. And you've also, as an organisation, you've moved into the value add proposition as well. We've obviously have your own wine labels, but also now into agritourism as well. How do you find agritourism as a venture, and whether it's a point of difference or as a challenge, I suppose?
It's a really good question. I actually love it. We run Das Virgin, which is a natural olive oil skincare business based at Seppelsfield, and so we focus on celebrating all things about extra virgin olive oil, from skin soap and gourmet food as well. Interestingly, whilst they're completely different businesses, I love the fact we spend time on the floor dealing with the customers in a retail environment. But there's that many parallels between customers in a retail environment versus customers in a large. I look at a lot. You off, Andy? Or,
No, I'm back now.
but
Sorry.
you know, with the customers at the retail face, you know, I think it's really about trying to deliver our outstanding service level, and how do you measure that success? Well, these days we've got lots of opportunities to measure success with social media and advisory reviews and things as well.
Yep. Obviously, having multiple sites around the country, you've got different operations where you've got that primary agricultural production, winemaking, agritourism. You've got there's a lot of competing interests, even though there's obviously a synergy between them all. Culture would be very important in how you actually manage your team and keep everybody, I guess, moving in the same direction. What is the broad question? But what does culture mean to you within FABAL, and how you go about harnessing the right culture?
Look, we could have another hour on culture. I think fundamentally, businesses are a reflection of the individuals within the organisation, and we shouldn't hide behind the corporate veil. We shouldn't ignore the fact that we just basically a sum of many parts. Culture, I think a lot about the fact that it's a values-based situation. You know, what are the values that drive the decisions of the business at a day-to-day level? Because from a leadership point of view, that's really where you set the bar. You know, what are the values that you accept? What are the standards that you display in your own actions and expect and tolerate within the business itself? So, so really it starts with that. And if you look at all of the literature and research, people leave bosses or leave values. That's why they leave organisations. And similarly, people are attracted to values that align with them. And that's what I love about the fact that we've got I run an exciting business. The people that are involved in it, and we're all different. We've all got different personalities, but we've got very similar values in the way we go about doing things. Probably for the purposes of this, Andy, one of the best pieces of literature I've come across in this space is a book by Buckingham and Kaufman called First Break All the Rules, and really interesting work that's looked at fantastic organisations and what drives them when it comes to building culture. And it looked at a whole suite of 400 or hundreds of different organisations, interviewed thousands and thousands of employees and managers. They did a regressional analysis on that and correlated between what questions and answers they received and the high-performing businesses. They ultimately ended up with 12 questions that if your staff answer them positively, you're guaranteed to have a successful business. If your staff answer them negatively, then you're doomed to fail. And so when we talk about culture, I started using those 12 questions as an interview or a survey to my staff many, many years ago. And ultimately, most decisions that I make center on some of those 12 questions. And they're simple questions, but don't really have anything to do with financial remuneration and things. And it's sort of that Maslow's hierarchy. But for an example, it's one of the questions is, do I have the right tools and equipment to do my job properly? Do people around me care about doing high quality work? Has someone spoken to me in the last 6 months about my progress and development? Have I received praise in the last 7 days for good work? Do I have someone that cares about me as an individual at work? So it's those questions that are based on a really, really fantastic empirical research, but help underpin organisations. And I see the response when we get distracted and we don't focus on those things, or we let it slip, and we can see the shift drift to the wrong direction. Or when we hone in on that, I can see us sort of plough through some of the most challenging times when we focus down in on those 12 questions.
That's a terrific insight, because you start looking at those questions that you just outlined, and it comes down to the fact of, does my employer care about me? It's essentially what it comes down to. So it's about displaying your, I guess, emotional intelligence as much as your organisational intelligence in ensuring that you're creating a workplace where people actually want to come to and feel supported. So that's a terrific insight. And I guess when you look back at where you've come from, you go back 23 years or however long it was ago back in Margaret River, and you're looking at all those long rows of things, thinking they must be the vines, and everyone starts turning up. I guess it was that turning up, and that was the value that people were bringing that actually attracted you to the industry in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think, and it still happens today. I've still got fantastic mates in the industry that I use, that I can pick up the phone and go confidentially. I can have a chat about a challenge or whatever. And I think it's something. You touched on mentors. I talked to you about Pikey, but I've been very lucky. Lots of different people that I can call on, and and similarly, I think it's incumbent upon us to try to keep that going from an industry point of view. Robin Day, I've learned more of just carrying Robin Day's lunch around, metaphorically speaking, but there's amazing horsepower in our industry, and I've never come across someone who's said no, I'm not prepared to help, and I try to do as much as I can in at my level, and now you got a few vintages under your belt, you can part a bit of that. Then it's one thing that struck me from our industry point of view. Whilst we go to the market and we compete, I think there's a camaraderie and a collegial undertone within the industry that's really positive.
Yeah. Ash, look, thank you so much for your time this morning. Hopefully there's not too many gremlins in the internet connection, and we'll capture everything that we've discussed today, because it's been a great conversation. You've got some fabulous insights. All the best, and thank you again.
Yeah, Andy. Cheers.
Thanks,
See you
Andy.
later.